Do you know what this is? Well, if you don't, if you watch the rest of this video, you're going to find out what it is, and not only what it is, but all the things that it can be used for to improve your clarinet. Now, this little guy right here is an undercutter. Now, most clarinet players have heard of undercutting, and they know that clarinet tone holes are undercut, at least in some cases. But, you know, most clarinet players, I was certainly among them, I had really no idea what undercutting really did. So, one of the questions that we're going to answer first, we're going to ask and then we're going to answer, is what is undercutting? Well, undercutting is what the French call phrasing, and that is basically creating a flare at the bottom of a tone hole. And this flare has several different effects, but it has one primary effect, and that is to adjust the tuning. Now, to adjust the tuning of what, you ask? To adjust the tuning of the first and second mode pitches. Now, let me explain what that means. The first and second mode is what people who do acoustical work refer to as the first register and the second register. So essentially, when you have two tones, a low note and a middle range note, coming out of the same tone hole, if they don't tune the same, that is, if they don't, say, both tune to A440 well, then one of the tones, or perhaps both of them, will have to be adjusted. And undercutting is one of the ways that clarinet makers and clarinet craftsmen use to adjust only one of those tones while the other stays stable, or at least that's the ideal condition. Okay? And I'll give you an example here. For instance, let's say that a low B flat below the staff happens to be flat. But the F, which also comes out of the same tone hole, the clarion F that sits on the top of the staff, if that's well in tune, then what do? You have a low or a flat B flat in the low register, but an in tune F. Well, undercutting is one of the prime means that a clarinet maker or a clarinet craftsman would use in order to raise that low B flat up in tuning, and it would flare the bottom of the tone hole, and the effect would be a minimal of adjustment in the tuning of the F on the top line, and you might say a much greater adjustment of the low B flat in terms of raising the pitch, and therefore bringing the 12ths better together in terms of the way they relate to A440. So clarinet tuning can be highly perfected with this method if clarinet design, clarinet bore design, and other things fall into place. So that would be great, and that would be a wonderful solution to many things if undercutting only adjusted tuning and always adjusted tuning in the same way and had no other effects. But unfortunately, undercutting does have some other effects, and we're going to talk about those next. The other effects undercutting adds to the clarinet's sound, besides an improved tuning in many cases, is a decrease in resistance. That is, a note will blow somewhat freer because it's been undercut, and an increase in flexibility, both of which are often very good qualities to be added to a note besides improving its tuning. And in the case of notes that tend to be a little bit flat, a little bit kind of stuffy and dull in color, undercutting is just what the doctor ordered, because not only will the tuning be adjusted, but that note will achieve a little more clarity and a little more resonance and a little more flexibility. So, you've killed several birds with on one stone, the stone of undercutting. But in other cases, this may not be the result. For instance, if a note already blows quite freely, if it's already, say, on the verge of not matching the notes around it because it's too flexible and too free, undercutting will only deteriorate those qualities even more. So then you have an uncentered sound, a note perhaps that blows so freely that it jumps out and doesn't match the other tones around it. And it's quite a dilemma. So what I'm saying is that undercutting should never be used in cases like that. What I'm saying is it should be used discerningly, and that whenever undercutting is used, it has to be used with a very, very refined perception of how the clarinet plays, responds, and tunes, and its flexibility and stability, and its tone color. A very refined perception of these things have to be employed, and an analysis of them has to be employed so that you don't do the wrong thing in the wrong sequence of time and ruin the clarinet or deteriorate the qualities in the process. I mean, after all, when you're working on a clarinet and doing customizing work, the object is actually to improve as much as possible without harming anything else. So, in the hands of people who do not have these discernment skills, and high discernment skills and refined skills, discernment that only a fine player would have, an undercutter can be nothing but a license to kill. You can really destroy the clarinet by just indiscriminately undercutting the clarinet, thinking you're improving things, because you, in many cases, are not. You're making things much, much, much worse, and you don't want to do that. So don't use undercutting yourself without thoroughly thinking things out, and don't let someone who doesn't play the clarinet on a very high level and understand cause and effect in clarinets ever touch your clarinet in terms of adjusting undercutting. You have to know what you're doing. The short answer to that, and the definitive answer to that, is no. Undercutting is used primarily in small bore clarinets, and it does improve the tuning. And if it's used in a discerning way, it also improves the flexibility and resonance of certain tones that really benefit from those things while avoiding the others. But undercutting is used much less so in small bore clarinets. And the reason for that is that it's needed less as far as adjusting the tuning. The 12ths are not better on the large bore clarinet, but the low mode, the first mode also in the right hand, tends to already be quite sharp in relationship to the second mode corollaries, the second mode pitches. So that to undercut it more would even make the low notes even more sharp and destroy the relationship between the low mode and the first mode and second mode even more than in the beginning. So you can make problems in a clarinet much worse by undercutting if you don't know what you're doing. So, what am I trying to say in all this? Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's no substitute for knowing what you're doing. No technique can be blindly employed by someone and with uniform success across the board. And undercutting is one of the prime examples of where that is extremely, extremely true. But undercutting is in the hands of a discerning, skilled artist and technician. Undercutting can be a tremendous benefit to your clarinet and make a tremendous improvement that'll make life much easier when you step out on that stage. I guess the Latin phrase here, caveat emptor, is something to invoke and leave you with. And if you don't understand Latin, and I don't either, but I do understand a few phrases. That simply is translated in English as buyer beware.